say I had a student that was really interested in both, like where would you think like directing them, like to push them to, where would you, I don't know, where would be like a good start? Directing them like creatively. That makes it hard. I feel like that's quite a general question, sorry.
No, but I think what's really exciting is there are so many fantastic, sometimes quite large exhibitions around art and ecology that have emerged in the last 2 years, and also brilliant institutions like the Horniman who are setting up artistic residencies and so on to really kind of do that sort of outreach work. So I think encouraging them to see as much as possible across the spectrum of art and design and natural history, and also go to use those museums as visual resources as well, and I think that one of the things that perhaps distinguishes art a bit from other forms of sort of visual communication really is this sort of freedom, of this imaginative freedom that allows you to break some rules and take scientific ideas and maybe do things that scientists might not approve of entirely, but that take you to another place and so on. So I think that would be one suggestion I would have, is just really encourage your students to get out and see really good work and like get them to expand the realm of possible, and get them to read and go to films and like, artists actually don't just look at arts, they look at everything, they're responding to the world. So yeah, I would say start with that.
At that point you made around artists being able to imagine beyond science current capacity is really interesting as well. Sometimes when they do the ecological schools work, we have art and design trainee teachers who imagine something that isn't in science yet, that might be humorous, or it might be so the example I've given in the workshop today is that students last year invented a carbon nunu, which just doesn't exist in science, but actually takes carbon out of the atmosphere, and they designed that, and that was part of their ecological design. So it's inviting curiosity, isn't it, and adventure, as well as looking at the facts, as well as looking at the what's happening and the increasing activity around ecology in culture, in society.
In my workshop, we spoke a bit about how it can be quite difficult to get students out on trips in school, especially secondary school. And so like trying to work in a cross-curricular way. So maybe linking up with colleagues in the science department and trying to organise a trip that would sort of satisfy aspects from both subjects could be a good way. And then projects that can go across subjects in schools as well. And I shared about a project we've done recently with a school locally to here, Adding Stanhope, on plastic pollution and its impact locally. And lots of different subjects were integrating that into their curriculum, and then it was kind of quite a unifying thing, and it meant there was more momentum to get out on these excursions and have these experiences, and it really enriched their learning by it being in that cross-curricular way as well.
Yeah, I would add to that. I definitely agree. There's also, if it's difficult getting students out, a lot of galleries and museums have very good online presence too, and often sort of education outreach. So I think you go into schools, and the Climate Museum also has, which is totally online, lots of great resources.
I'm not sure whether this will come out as a question, but Lauren, I thought it was really interesting what you were saying about art as a way of exploring scientific questions. And I was almost imagining it as maybe a year 9 student who's kind of decided that he's more into sciences and he's not happy about doing art. Getting him to think about his science studies and how he can combine art or illustrate his science interests, thought was really interesting. I mean, I suppose you're pitching to more of an arty crowd here today about bringing us over to science. Have you got any experience of going to a more science crowd and drawing them towards art?
Yeah, I think this is the first art crowd that I've spoken to, so I feel like a bit of an imposter. So yeah, usually I'm talking to other scientists or people on conservation courses and masters of do it, you know, ecology masters and things like that, or PhD students, about how they should be fostering their own creativity, and how it's a really welcoming crowd of people. A lot of scientists are actually really creative. So many of my friends and colleagues have really creative hobbies that I think it's quite a common personality type. I don't know whether it's like you need attention to detail for both. You need to be quite like, you know, maybe obsessive, or not afraid of, you know, lengthy hours of work. And I think that people don't really realise that there's space for their, you know, creative hobbies within their own work. So, you know, people can take wonderful photographs as well, that when they're out in the field, that they can put in their publications. And it is people thinking like, oh no, I can't draw, and, you know, getting the message across that it's just, you know, practice makes progress, and just have a go, basically. So yeah, I think there's a little bit of a clash of, like, in science, in the science kind of research world, you have to be, to speak about a topic, you have kind of been taught that you have to be a real expert in that topic. Like, if people are called on to like Radio 4 or something, and they're a bee expert, and someone asks them about a wasp, they're like, oh, couldn't possibly comment. But like, they probably do know way more about wasps than the average person. So there's kind of a bit of a mental barrier in thinking I'm not an art expert, so I can't do that in my work. But actually, in my experience, like, there's no judgment. People just think, oh, well done for having a go, like, this is great, I understand it better now. So yeah, I don't know if how much you can get that across to kind of science students. I think, yeah, maybe just letting them know that it's a relevant, you know, useful and relevant skill if you're going to progress into that kind of career, then that could be helpful.
I think there's a really interesting way in which this could circle back to the other question about how you get scientifically orientated people to be, you know, engaging, observing, and using those sort of artistic skills, is actually also kind of getting people out into the natural world and the benefits that brings, and really sort of there's something that I've seen lots of artists and scientists I know who work together talk about, and that is when you have the sort of benefits of the naive question, and so someone coming into your workspace and say, oh, well, why do you do things that way, you know? And I remember a conversation that I heard from the artists who work in Sealy in this art science residency, talking about, you know, one of the scientists was talking about the zooplankton he's studied for 40 years as citizens of the sea. And one of the artists said, well, what does that actually mean, to call zooplankton a citizen? And does that change how you do science around them? At this point, he like held his head and said, oh my God, I've killed so many creatures in doing my research. But at the end of the sort of workshops now that he does with like taking samples of seawater and going them under the microscope, he stays behind and he collects up all the samples and he takes them down to the jetty. He pours them back into the ocean. So at least some of them are saved. So I think there's this way in which these kind of these apparently sort of stupid questions are actually can throw light on something that people are kind of somehow taking for granted, and that benefits people who may be a bit stuck in their silos or taking their assumptions for granted somehow. So I always think there's no such thing as a stupid question, but sometimes we feel a little bit brittle around our areas of expertise somehow.
Definitely, I think that can be a real power. I actually think that I'm getting worse at science communication the more I go into science. I think on my masters, there was kind of the sweet spot where I was kind of a novice at everything, but still really interested. Whereas now I think I spend my whole time, you know, using these really this jargon basically, and that's become more normalized. And I think that you become less good at, you know, seeing the bigger picture. So if you can work, I think collaborations are the way to do that, and getting different perspectives on board is, can create some really, really interesting work.
Lauren, and just about when and sorry if you've kind of covered this, but introduced yourself within your science environment as an artist and started having those conversations, or when people knew that you actually had artistic skill and you wanted to bring that in, and whether in your journey as a science artist, it was the science community that was supporting you in that, or the artistic one? Because I think the artistic community can be difficult at times, you know, in terms of like you doing well with your work and having your work in various things.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's really interesting to hear, because I think that actually my whole, career, I don't know if you can call it, that's been like 3 years, but has been through the scientific community supporting me. And I think that I seem to have kind of been able to make these connections with wildlife organisations because I have the contacts from my science side. So if professors and things that taught me on my masters would say, oh, I need to put you in contact with that person from the RSPB because they want to do some art to talk about curlews or something. So then I'm working with ecologists all the time, or people in wildlife organisations, you know, doing other roles, and they're the ones who have been really supportive. So, and I think partly that's because I'm like the only artist that anyone knows. So, which is ridiculous, you know. We need more people, you know, more breadth of ideas. And also now I'm a full-time scientist, so I can't take on all like animations and things. So I have some like Instagram's been really great for connecting with a bit of an art community. And that's also, in my experience, been really positive and supportive for other people doing these kinds of things. So we help each other out with like commissions and stuff, sending them around to each other. But yeah, I don't think I've scratched the surface of the real art community. I think I'd say that I was more towards the environmental people and like science communication people, which I think also is bad because then you're speaking into your own echo chamber. Like maybe it's only kind of environmental people who are seeing my work, or yeah, I don't know how I would crack into that community, but you know, could take the work into new realms of society, which would be really important as well.
Yeah, that's lovely.
Oh, thank you.